All right, happy campers. Hey, this is Casey here with Mountain Bluebird, and happy to talk to you today about a new mod I'm making in my van. Again, I built this out about 3 or 4 years ago. Been using a lot. It's been great. I have a lot of functionality. And to put that in perspective, this may seem ludicrous, but I counted up once. I think I have 24 USB power ports in the van, so a ton. Right, and when I did build out the van 4 years ago, USB power ports were absolutely the thing, and they still work great. I get to charge up my cell phones and headphones and power up, GPS devices and gosh, all the different things I have in here, tablets and bike computers and bike. Batteries and all that kind of stuff. I say bike batteries meaning like the shifters and derailleurs, not I don't have any electric bikes. So all those kinds of things are great for that, but they're actually a little bit underpowered for powering up like a laptop. And it so happens a laptop I have nowadays is powered entirely off a USB-C port, and the USBs I have are all the USB-As, right? The standards, the standard one that was typical. Let me show you here. So basically, that right there, that's a USB-A, right? And yet the laptops today are powered by the USB-C, the new universal serial bus. And that USB-C is wonderful for charging up a laptop. It so happens though that the USB-A anyways, you just have to have a cable converter like that. But I'm using those now instead of have to bring a power supply along, plugging into my my 120 volt circuitry, which I leave my inverter on all the time anyways. That's always powered up, but it is less efficient. There's always losses through an inversion process. Any kind of power conversion, power transformation, power change in voltage, right? Or from AC to DC, DC back to AC, there's always going to be some losses there. So in order to prove that, I'm going to go right from DC 12 volts right into the laptop, which is actually taking 12 volts DC, and then it converts at all its different voltages onto the chips and so forth that are inside that that laptop. So it's a great way to charge. I'm just going to change out to put in a USB-C charging port. This right here, dual USB-C charging port. Okay, a little hard to see, but that way I can just use a straight USB-C to USB-C. I don't have to go buy another cable and all that stuff. All these laptops come with that nowadays. But I'm going to actually do it on one of these, which just plugs into a standard cigarette lighter, instead of buying the whole USB port that I have, which I don't have a free one around here to show you. Well, here you go. I'm going to give you a quick look. That's what I mean by USB-C, if you can see that right there. I mean USB-A, sorry. And that's USB-A, and that is a high-powered one from Blue Sea Systems. Fantastic. I believe puts out 2.8 amps per port, 2 ports. So you get a really good, amount of charge on those, which is wonderful at 12 volts. But it's really, I have a ton of these left over. A standard, people call them a cigarette lighter. 12 volt power port is what it is. And with this, I can just buy any one of these really cheap plug-in 12 volt power port devices. So whether we go from USB-C to USB-Z, 10 years from now, it'll always be able to be easily converted. These are cheap and ubiquitous, and cheaper than buying something like this that's hardwired in that is USB-C, or like I said, whatever the future standard's going to be. Let's hope we don't keep going to these new standards. So anyways, I'm going to give you a quick little run through. I'm going to add that port into my van. I'm going to just give you a quick little run through like what I did in my van electrically and talk through that. And then also how I'm going to add this, just give you little tips on wiring, labeling wiring, how to make that wiring really strong, the kinds of connectors I use to do that. Also a little bit on my electrical schematic and topology within the van, because I'll say it's a bit complex. I actually have, quickly adding it up, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 main power panels. I know it sounds absolutely ludicrous. I have one on each of the back corners, so they're small little with I think there's four 4 fuses in each one of those 4 circuits. So that powers some of the lights that are powered off the back, in the back there, in each corner. That way we don't have to run wiring across the van or run it all the way up the van in order to just get that power back there in the back corner. I've one up in my kitchen space, that space right up there. Well, here's my kitchen and that panel right there. So that allows me to have power there, but also gets it all the way up to my ceiling, or my roof, where I have lights on each, exterior lights on each side of my roof rack. 2, a pair on the left, a pair on the right, also a pair in the back, a set in the front. I also got my solar panel, lights and stuff comes in through there, so that makes it really convenient. So I can only run really one big pair of wires for the positive and negative on the 12-volt system up to these sub panels, from the main electrical distribution and out to all these little sub panels. And I have another really big one that happens to be right below my fridge here. And so it's going to be really short, easy run. And so I thought this would be a great way to run through it. So I'm going to do that today, talk through a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview as I do this. So looking forward to sharing more with you on that, and hopefully it's helpful. And certainly by all means, subscribe. I got a lot more videos coming, and I'll help out however I can. If you have things you'd like me to do a video on, or you have questions, by all means reach out. I'm usually very good at answering those questions. Try to be helpful. So many people were helpful to me through this process of me figuring out what to build in my van starting back in 2015 and buying it eventually really in 2016 and taking delivery in 2017 and building it out then and in 2018. So and I've been getting lots of use out of it ever since, and happy to share. So do reach out, put your comments down, let me know if there's other videos you'd like, and by all means subscribe and you'll get more videos in the future. So looking forward to sharing this video with you, and so hang in there, and you'll see more soon. Okay, so to start, here's where I'm going to put it. I'm sitting right now in my bench seat. And by the way, my bench seat rotates. It actually rotates 180 degrees. So it can face forward when the 2 passengers, is a 2-passenger bench seat with seat belts built in. This is actually a seat made for buses, but I had it custom made for me. But it is crash safety, crash test and all that stuff. It is regularly built down, but I built it on a really solid turntable. It is like a 30-pound turntable. I say turntable, a swivel, but made really heavy duty. It's actually made for trucks. Anyways, it's solid as heck. This way the bench seat can face forward with 2 people. It's cantilevered out over the aisleway here for the person that's sitting in the middle. But it is solid as can be, but it can also then rotate up against the wall like I am right now, although I have it rotate a little bit backwards so I can just access, like I said, it rotates over 180. I can actually rotate all the way forward behind the driver's seat and face out the window. Not that I ever really sit like that, but it's convenient right now in the way I can rotate it slightly back so I can reach where I'm reaching to. I've got the electric panel right down here. I've already disassembled some of that, so I'll get in there and I'll show you more of that later. But this is my the back side of my fridge. This is a fold down table. I'll go more on that in a minute. This is the back side of my fridge. I actually have a vented high strength perforated PVC, so the fridge can have ventilation. It's running right now. You might hear it. I've got my remote for my rear attic fan. These little things hold my curtains back in, which I have them a little bit pulled away right now. And that's my USB power port here, my USB-A. I'm gonna add another power port right in here for that USB-C. Make it really easy when I'm sitting here working on the road. Also got a light here, little reading light, that dims on and off. And then it even has a blue setting here, this little blue light, which is pretty much just a little night light. So anyways, I'm gonna take this panel off. So I can just see in the back, make sure before I drill through this, I've got it a good spot to drill through, that they're not hitting anything behind there. I know there's a wiring chase that runs a little conduit, wiring conduit right here that runs for my electrical up above. And so I want to make sure I'm clear of that. And I'm going to pull this panel off, drill the hole, and install the power port, run the wiring down to my electrical box right down below here, which is just awesome. If this is a tip, this is I'll say a pro tip, even though I'm not a pro, but I'll give you a quick pro tip. Add more electrical circuit capacity than you think you'll need. So if you think you're going to have a need for 10 circuits, yeah, you can buy a 12 circuit panel. That's probably okay. But make sure you have the capacity to expand upon that, because you'll probably at some point in time, like I'm doing now, go, oh, I really could use 1 or 2 more ports. So down here, I have a 12 circuit panel I also have another 6-circuit panel, and then a high-powered 4-circuit panel, and that's for the high-powered connections in DC. And you know, when you add in heater and hydronic pump, the fans for the fan coils for my heating system, all that are in separate circuits. I have a little cooling fan for the fridge back here that turns automatically with temperature to kind of bring a little more ventilation in the back of the van. I've got lights overhead, obviously the little night lights and these power ports and, you know, all that stuff. But eventually, you know, it adds up, right? So anyways, you know, put in extra circuits just to make sure even you've got what you need. Even in this electrical box, here I'll show you, even have a light in the electrical box. So when I'm working here, I got a little extra light, which is great when you're like in the dark or in kind of a tough spot trying to work. So boom, light on, light off. So anyways, I'm gonna now, I just so happen to have one extra free spare port that I'm not using, and that's it. So I'm gonna tie into that one. So we'll show you more here in a moment. Okay, so to put one of these in, it's really quite simple. And by the way, this is also Blue Sea power port. Really high quality, very excellent. It's pretty much all I bought was Blue Sea electrical equipment, except for like the inverter and solar charge controllers and things like that. Anyways, they take a 1 1/8 inch hole saw, you know, to install these. Are quite simple. You just drill the hole, screw that in on the back side to make it tight, and hook the wiring up. I installed, I don't know how we can see this, but because I used this 1/4 inch plastic and 1 inch aluminum framing, all I do is take 2 bolts out, 2 screws and 2 bolts really. That's it. And because they're bolted into a metal nut, so there's no, you know, weakening at all of like a wood or anything else that can happen. I can literally just pull on this high strength plastic is incredibly strong, and I can pull it, and I can pull this right out. I can see the hole I need to make and drill that, and voila. And so I'm just gonna do it right now. Here we go. And voila. And this, where having another person with a vacuum on this would be great, because it'd make it look, the cleanup a lot easier. But that's all I had to do with this 1/4 inch plastic, super easy to cut through. I'll clean up that hole and suck up all this debris. But you can tell it's no sawdust. It's just a little bit of plastic falls down. I could just suck it right up with some with the vacuum, and that'll make it really clean, easy, and I'll proceed. All right, 2 more pro tips here. One, I think it's called a reamer, but it's actually like a whole rounding device. And so it's a simple little sharp rounded blade. It allows you to countersink a hole to round it out. And it works really great too for plastic to just simply round up these little edges. Because this is a perforated plastic, parts can get kind of caught on these holes here. But nonetheless, it just rounds out, just cleans it up. I like to have a nice clean finish on it. And so that's a great little tool. You can get these everywhere. They're about 15 bucks, and inside you can hear it shaking. There's extra blades in the inside there. But this lasted my entire van build out, this one blade. I rounded all of my corners on, I don't know if you can see these corners here, but all these corners like on like this pull down slide out table. So everything's nice and smooth and just looks really great. And people do really like that finish. I like it too. It's really, so that's it. Simple little tool. Second little tip, a portable vacuum. Doesn't really matter what brand or whatever, but something that's durable, like a little portable shop vac. All right, so the pro tip, portable shop vac. Absolutely key, because I can't always get a full-size shop vac hose all the way into where you're working in the van, or sometimes you pull the whole shop vac into the van, but just a lot of times you just use a little portable one. In this case, battery powered, so super easy. And just clean up the stuff, vacuum it up. Boom, super easy. And yes, and the countersink tool. All right, another pro tip here for you guys. When you're installing any electrical, you always want to make sure that your wire size is sized to the load and your fuse is fused to your wire, right? The fuse is really there to protect the wire, to make sure your wire doesn't burn up. And of course, that would be very dangerous in a boat or an RV or anything like that. So you want to make sure that your wire that you whatever fuse you put in is sized to the wire, but ideally you want to put the wire and make sure it's sized to the fuse. So what I use is the Blue Seas wire calculator. It's free. It's a free Blue Seas app. You can download it from your various different app stores. Fantastic device, or fantastic tool. You can plug in your various different things, and right here, I know it's gonna be a little hard to see, but I plugged in here my voltage, my amperage, 5 amps, 12 volts. My length of my conductor is 4 feet. It's really a little less than, it's about 18 inches for each run, the negative and the positive, but you do the total both, so I really round up there. That's my 4 feet. I'm doing an allowable voltage drop of 10% on this one. Perfectly fine with my 13.2 volt battery resting voltage on lithiums, and for what this is doing. And 90 degrees C wire, that's going to be by the rating on your wire, so it depends on the wire you get, but it will say right on the sheath or side of your wire here what rating it is. I believe this wire is actually maybe even higher than 90 C. The higher it is, the higher temperature it can support. But anyways, you put that in there. And I always like to buy the higher, at least 90 C rated wire, even though it's probably a little bit overkill. Installed in engine room is another question. No, in this case it's not. Wires in bundle. In this case I'm going to put 2 to 3. That's the next selector above 1, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be 2 wires of positive and negative coming down to right here down to my little electrical box. My duration, that's the duration that's going to run. I'm doing that as 60 minutes with my assumption that basically, at the most, I'm going to have 5 amps running for 60 minutes, 5 amps charging a laptop, or powering it and charging up to 5 amps for 60 minutes. Probably I'm not going to be, it's probably if I'm, it's probably that load of charge load is probably going to go down after 60 minutes. But the reality is too, is I already bumped this from 60 minutes to 120 minutes. If it was a 2-hour charge for the laptop, if it was really run down, it probably really wouldn't change this rating at all. Terminate and fuse, yes. Little button down here, calculate. Boom, let's calculate it. And now it comes back and says, we only need an 18 gauge wire. That's it, because this is a pretty short run and not a lot of amperage. Now, I'm going to probably go ahead and put in, I don't know if I really have any 18 gauge. I have a bundle of wires that are cut from wires I've used. I don't know if I haven't found like an 18 gauge wire that's black and red. And I always like to slightly bump up. And this is another pro tip. When you buy your wire for your wiring you're doing in your RV, van conversion, boat, whatever it may be, there's generally, all of your connectors are rated really for like 10 to 12 gauge, 14 or 16 gauge, 18 or 20 gauge, kind of like that. And so I always like to buy the bigger wire, which is the lower gauge number for that connector size. And that way, instead of buying like a 12 gauge wire that's going into a connector that is really designed for 10 to 12 gauge and having a little bit of a loose connection, when you bundle it, you really got to make sure when you crimp it, it's really tight and all that stuff. I just like to buy just the one step up. And that way it reduces any risk that I'm going to have a loose connection. It's a good solid connection. I've got a little bit larger size wire, which is just one size wire is a just nice safety factor. And so even though it says 18 gauge, I'm probably going to go with 16 gauge here, which would be the next size up. And so I'm going to look for some 16 gauge. And also another point, I pulled out some of these wires that I have that are laying around. And by the way, it'll say on there, if you don't know this, but it'll say right on here, it'll have this writing. By the way, this is a 105 degrees C wire. It says right on there, and it's printed on there. And it'll say your gauge. And unfortunately, these things are typically pretty hard to read. That's why I'm kind of squinting to look here. But that writing will be on the side of your wire and invisible. In this case, and in this case, this is 14 gauge. Okay, it's bigger than I need, right? And it's been a while since I've been doing this conversion. So this is bigger than I need, but nonetheless, I could use this. I just have this little extra piece here. The one thing too, this is always stranded, not solid core. Solid core is what we typically use in house electrical. This stranded core is very flexible, easy to bend, turn, everything else. This is marine grade Encore rated, ANCOR. Fantastic, really high quality wire. You can get it in a sheath. like this, that already is protected. So it's very much like it's a protected cable, right? And so if you're running this around any kind of sharp edges or bends, which you should always protect those sharp edges and bends from cutting into the wire ever, but nonetheless, it gives you a nice protective sheath, right? And it's already bundled together, so it also makes wiring runs easier when you're running two wires together. You notice also it's yellow and red, and typically when you see DC power, you often see a red and a black, which is fine. There is unfortunately no real standard when it comes to the colors of 12-volt DC wiring. Typically, the hot is red, and typically or often the negative, which you don't have a black here, is black. Now what I did is I standardized wherever I could, and I say wherever I could because a lot of devices actually have black for the negative. I used yellow, and that is kind of becoming a standard in boats, and I believe it should be in RVs as well, because we also have 120 volt power, as I have all over. Even right here, I have a 120 volt outlet, right, very close to where I'm putting it in this this 12 volt power supplies. In AC, it's your hot, which is your black, your white, it's white, which is your neutral, and versus in DC, it's a negative. And then, of course, we have a green for our ground. So if I ran a red and a black, if someone pulled out this wire and they saw black, they could think that's an AC system and not a DC system, which could lead to a dangerous situation if they start working on it and think it's DC and not AC, or vice versa. So by using yellow, not a wire that can be conflicted with AC systems, that's my negative, right? And my red also, again, not a color to be conflicted with AC systems. This is my positive, this is my negative. In the AC systems, I should pull out a wire for that. But again, it's black for hot, it's white for neutral, and it's green for ground. So completely different colors. So if you come across some wires that are for your AC system and you see that they're black and white and green, okay, that's AC. This way there's no confusion. So that's also another tip. It doesn't cost you any more to get the yellow. If anything, it's actually cheaper to get this wire combined together in red and yellow, because it is becoming more the standard. So that is another thing I recommend when you're doing your wiring. All right, back to you. I'm going to go get this wiring going, and I'll come back with a few more tips. All right, guys, next two tips here. Number one, I decided to change actually my amperage. Even though I know that this USB device is only good for a few amps, total 5 amps for the ports here. I do know also that the power port that I'm using, this right here, you can actually go up to 15 amps on these, and that's pretty common. That's what this is rated to. So knowing that, I decided I'm going to change my wiring and bump it up to that 15 amps. And with that the Blue Sea power calculator app, it's really easy. I can just go in there, keep everything else the same, just go change the amperage from 5 to 15. Boom. I also just changed the duration 120 minutes, just to be sure that I've got plenty of time to charge at the higher voltage or power something for that higher amperage and power it for that long. And so ever in the future, it's more future proofing. If like one of these devices is capable of charging at a higher amperage, I'm good. And part of what drove me that decision also is this happened to have some leftover. These are remnants from my past bills, just showing you already this 12 gauge, which just so happened that's what it came out to be. Yellow and red already ready to go. So I'm just going to use this. So two tips. One is I am going to label the ends of these ring connectors, which these ring connectors will go onto the fuse box, fuse panel. So I got my ground and my positive, or my negative and my positive. They're going to get screwed down. I absolutely prefer a ring connector over a spade. The spades can come loose. The rings can hold on. They're screwed on. They'd have to screw to come loose. While I'm in the fuse panel, I'm checking all the screws to make sure they're all tight. Make sure those connections have come loose. They're all good. And I'm also, so that's one part, but I'm going to label it. And so the way I label it is I use a really good quality label maker. I'm using also a heat shrink tube. This is 3/4 inch. It's bigger than what I need for this wire at a 1/2 inch, but because I already have these connectors on the end, I got to be able to get over those. And this is heat shrink. So I can print it out, and then I can put it on this wire, and heat it up, and very quickly it'll shrink right up, and voila. And so now that I've got it already out, I've got my name of my device on there. I'm gonna hit print, and it's printing out right now. And make sure you do it in a font that's big enough but not too long you can see. So now that's boom, that's there, it's printed out. I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna do one for the positive and also one for the negative. By doing that, doesn't matter if I'm looking at my negative bus or my positive fuse panel, I will know that that wire goes to this power port up here. And whatever your labeling scheme is, keep it fairly simple. Make sure a future owner, years from now after you built it and you're like, oh shoot, what did I mean by that crazy convention of 2ZY32, which I thought I'd remember that meant, that this one over here. Just keep it very simple and logical, and sometimes you have to use an adjective like front, back, driver's side, passenger side. On my driver's side, passenger side, I often do a PS or a DS for driver and passenger side. Even that could be misconstrued. You could say left and right or R and L. There's different things you can do to do that, but I try to keep it pretty simple so anybody can really figure it out that's working here. So now I'm going to take this and we're going to go put it on the heat gun here. Okay, so next tip is the heat gun. I told you about the labels, label maker, and labeling up each of the connectors. You don't need to label on the ends of the device because you know what that device is, unless you want to say where it goes to, hey, this is getting power from, this switch panel or fuse panel or something like that. But anyways, one tip I really have is this Wagner heat gun. I've gone through 2 or 3 different heat guns, and I have to say, without doubt, the Wagner is by far the best. It is not really any more expensive than the others. It heats up extremely quickly. You've got nice little different temperature settings, and fan settings. You can even do cool. It's incredibly durable. I've dropped it many times, is just what happens. And it is durable, no noticeable change. Like I said, it heats up incredibly quickly. And this is the other tip. When you put your labels on, make sure you put them on in a way that however you're gonna screw in your wires, that you can actually read this, because sometimes you have it upside down or sideways and it's hard to read. So I try to keep that, look at how they're gonna be connected, how the wires are gonna come in, and wiring up appropriately. I also like to start my wire just below the ring, so I'm not insulating any of the ring. These are an insulative and somewhat waterproof wire heat shrink tube here. So I don't want to cover up the ring. And then all I'm going to do is just start putting that heat on there. And already, like even in that minute or so of this running, it's already fully hot to cover this up. And I also like to start at the top meaning, and this just like where the connector is, and work my way down, because by doing that, and then I go back and just and spin it around as I'm doing that. And then as I go back, and I sometimes take a little wrinkle in there, and I go in and kind of clean those up. And so again, getting this position where you're going to see it. These ring terminals have an end that kind of you're going to likely stick out. But by starting at the top, the place where the connector is, however the heat shrink tube shrinks up, because it's not just, it is going to shrink a little bit in length as well. It's not creating these wrinkles as it goes down. It's creating a nice tight connection. It adds to the strength of the terminal that you've connected onto the end of this wire. And that's a wonderful, absolutely wonderful benefit, just to help strengthen up, give it a nice, not just label, it cleans it up, but you get this little bit of extra protection on the end of that wire to help insulate it, protect it from, whatever that may happen to it. And when you put your heat gun down, make sure you put it away where it's not going to touch you or anything else, because otherwise you burn yourself or you'll melt something. So I'm setting it down on the concrete floor. So there you go. We're going to go install this, and I'm going to show you one more tip. All right, guys, here, a couple more pro tips. One is something like this, a pickup tool, which this one happens to be lit. When you push the button here to open it up, it lights up. And the little tiny screw there that is on my negative bus, and I unscrewed it to tie this wire in. it just fell and down into my little wiring loom, so I was able to pick it up with this little tool here. The magnetic ones also can work great. However, these screws that come with the Blue Sea and many of the other 12-volt fuse panels or other fuse panels are typically stainless, and of course stainless is not all that magnetic, so it's much harder to pick those up, hence the pickup tool works better. So that's one pro tip. The other one is something long, like a longer set of needle nose pliers. Often the shorter ones work great for most things, but occasionally you need a longer pair like this. I actually have a set of these longer ones that some are curved like 90 degrees, some are curved like a 45 degree, some are needle nose. These thicker ones are the other part of that set, and these longer ones can be very helpful when trying to grab like the wires in this case. That's the other pro tip I'm going to give you. I am, as you can see behind me here, pre-run the wire down into my box. I've pre-connected the positive and negative wires to where they're going to connect. That way I know I have the right length. I've already got my routing done for that wire up through this hole. And so now that I have all that done, now I can go ahead and I can cut this where I have a little bit of extra. I want to make sure you have enough extra wire. You can adjust or pull something out if you need to. But that way you know you have the right length. That's a good way to do it, instead of trying to take a tape measure or trying to guess or something like that. If you just hook one end and bring the other end up to where the other end up, you can cut it from there. So that's what I'm doing. Now another kind of safety tip is to make sure that if you're working with anything that's hot, in this case I'm connecting this hot positive wire right to my fuse panel, I make sure that fuse that I'm connecting that onto that circuit, that fuse is not in there, so that connection is not, it's not live. So I can cut this wire and not worry about getting a spark, or I'm just going to blow the fuse anyways if I cut it, but I'm not going to blow that fuse. I'm not going to get cause some other electrical issue or something like that as I short the negative and positive together. So just and also when you reach into a live electrical panel like I am right now, make sure you're safe. Make sure your hands aren't going where there's something hot. I do have a main shore power circuit breaker box right here, which is a 30 amp connection coming in. And so if I reach back there and I touch that, yeah, I'm going to get a good shock out of that. So either I shut that down while I'm working this, which is fine. The van will run on the batteries just fine without shore power. So it's not a big deal. I can work in here with lights and everything else while, for days without shore power. Just make sure you're not touching it, or you're safe, or you wear some sort of like insulation gloves or something if you can, or whatever you need to make sure you keep yourself safe. So that's another pro tip. All right, we're gonna get this wired up, finish it up, show you the results, and give you a couple more little tips to help you with your electrical wiring in your van or whatever else you're wiring. Okay, next pro tip here: sharp razor blade, but keep it shallow on the length. This is how I pull off the insulation, or the sheathing. I shouldn't say the insulation, but the sheathing around the wires. I make sure I got it flat, because this Encore wire has a nice flat profile for this 2 wires, and I go right down the middle between the 2. I don't push hard in here, and I make sure I'm going down the middle, so I go just gently and slow. And when I get to the end, I also, you notice I kind of just push downward, and don't even cut it quite all the way. And then that way I can just peel it off. And part of the reason why is because if I get all the way, I'm gonna have a blade that's gonna come loose and off. And then there you go. So now that's off. Now I'm gonna show you the next tip, and that is, sorry about it being all shaky and angled, but that's a wire stripper like this. Yeah, you can use those other kinds of wire strippers where you gotta get the wire in there in the right gauge. This doesn't matter the gauge, it'll handle wire up to that thickness. You can adjust right here with this thing, the length of the strip. So I have this set where it'll strip it at a good length. You could, for what I tip my connectors, you can adjust the tension on that, and I'll show you how great this works. I'm gonna cut this off in a minute here, but I just wanna make sure I got you that. Boom, and boom, and see how easy it is? It does a really nice strip, just perfectly the length I need. Now, this is a little bit precarious. I shouldn't say precarious, but you want to cut this little tail off here. So this is where, get the blade out just long enough for you to do a nice little easy cut off there, and that's it. So this protective sheathing is now off. I've got my wires stripped. Now all I gotta do is put some wire connectors on these, clean these up, put the wire connectors on and crimp those on, and we're gonna wrap this up. All right, guys, next two tips. One is you're probably going to have 3 different size or more electrical wires in your van build out. And so what I've done to keep that all nice and organized, I actually have a few of these trays. And so this is one of my trays, and this is one for my typical wire connectors. I've got my 10 to 12 gauge right here. The blue is at 14 to 16 gauge, and then the red's at 18 to 20 gauge, right? And I've got my kind of common ones I use, the little ring connectors. I always make sure I've got a good supply of what I'm gonna need. And I buy really generally good quality ones. You can get really cheap ones, but I do tend to buy the higher quality ones because they're just easier to crimp, they hold better and all that. And so this way it's nice and organized. So that's one tip, all right? Here's the second tip. I know that this wire here is a 12 gauge wire. So I've got my yellow connectors, and I'm going to put these on. I'm going to show you how this tool is another pro tip here. Hopefully you can see us okay. Sorry about the little bit of a shakiness. But when I put these on there, and again, it's a little easier with this wire we're out, but I make sure I've got it on there good. I'm not pulling wire back. This crimper, these are great. These ratchet action ones. You can see it's got a yellow, blue, and red. So the yellow connector goes right in there. I just have to put it right in that spot, give it a good crimp. It's pretty hard to pull that at the end. And then I test it, and you can see that came right off. So that has happened a couple of times, and that's because this ratchet adjustment is either needs to be adjusted, or I might be able to, because this is 12 gauge, I might be able to get a 14 to 16 gauge female spade connector in there, and I cannot. All right, so we're gonna try this again here. So we're gonna put that in there, make sure these wires, I just give them a little bit of a twist on the connector at the same time. I'm gonna go to the blue setting, which is gonna be a bit of a harder crimp. And I'm gonna even use the van cabinet here as my lever. Boom, now that crimp is nice and solid. I'm testing it by pulling on it, give it a good tug, it's solid. So now I'm gonna do the same with the other one. And sometimes that happens. The connectors you get, I said I like to use really good quality connectors and stuff, but sometimes the connectors you get are just a little oversized or whatever. So sometimes you have to step it down to the next level. That's not gonna hurt the wiring because it's all getting crimped in there. It's okay. Now these are totally solid. And now I can put in my, my nice little electrical power port here. And when I put this in, you see it's got this rubber cover. I'm going to take this rubber cover off because I used to leave them on, but then they dangle around, especially with something in there. So the nice thing about these is they're optional. You just take that right off. This is not in a wet environment, so it can totally come off. And now on the back of these, you see there's a positive and negative. Maybe hard to see in the video, but make sure you fold it up, put the positive in and the negative in. But before we do that, we got to make sure we also put the ring on that this is going to go from the back side, right? So now what I need to do is reach in my hole, pull this wiring out, make sure it doesn't fall through, put my little ring connector on, bring this wiring back through. And again, this is fantastic about this plastic, because if this was wood, obviously there's no way I could bend it like this without cracking it or something else. So I always double check my positive and negative when I'm putting it on, and make sure that I've got those right. And then when I get it on, I even once again look again. Yep, positive, negative. Yep, yellow to red. Talk to yourself. Make sure you have it right. And now the trickiest part, probably this whole entire, maybe not the trickiest part, but now is got to bring up that little locking nut that screws on the back here. And instead of rotating the power port, which would, sorry if it's hard to see there, instead of rotating the power port, I'm gonna rotate the ring, right, until it gets nice and strong against there, and just keep doing that. And these rings are really long because these power ports are pretty long. And unfortunately, it feels like it went on just a little bit cross-threaded, and sometimes that can happen. So there we go, that just got fixed. I'm spinning it on, and I'm gonna spin it on so it's nice and tight. And on these little rings on the back, you can also take a screwdriver and push down on the little locking nuts to really get it tight, which I could do, but I think in this case, I'm not. I don't think it's gonna add a lot of value. I think I get it really tight, and getting a screwdriver in here at this point is gonna be a bit tough. So now, that should be good. We can test out the power before we screw this up, which I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna test out the power here, make sure it's hot and live by turning on the power, plugging this in. By plugging this in, it's got a little LED light on there, so the indicator light's gonna tell me I have power. And then I can go ahead and put the 2 remaining screws into this panel, screw it back up, and voila, we've got another power port. Okay, back at you. So I connected up my 15 amp fuse to the power. I've got the LED light that's on that, so I know I've got power. The 15 amp again is the appropriate size for the gauge of wire. It will support this device or the power port entirely. The USB charging will only charge at whatever the little USB charger here is capable of, or and the laptop will power down to that. It might, meaning as far as the charge rate, it may be able to charge at say 20 amps, but it recognizes I only got 5 amps available. I'm only going to charge at 5 amps, so it's just going to take a lot longer to charge. If you were using your laptop, it may use, you know, all of that available amperage, and you may slowly draw down your power because it's offsetting only some of your usage, but not all. So you may not charge it then. But then when you're driving, plug it in, and voila, you're charging up. So again, this is a real convenience of using these plastic panels and the aluminum profile that's behind here. That's my frame structure to support it in. Look how simple that is. To put this back all together, boom, I just have to put these 2 screws back in the nuts that I have retained in that little spot in there in that track, tighten them up, and I'm done. This panel is done. I don't have to like reconfigure a bunch of stuff. I've got my good little flashlight here that I keep in a charger right down here, so I could use that to see where those nuts were through the holes. Whoops, and it just turned on because I put it on the wrong way, but it goes right into a little USB charger down here. So I've always got a flashlight handy, ready to go. And let's see, to wrap this up here, now I've got really 4 USB ports here, so I can plug in to power a phone off the USB-A, the older style. And while I'm working here, I can plug that in, or like a Bluetooth headphone. I could power a laptop off, it just won't power as high. Or I can plug in this higher voltage power port here and really get a lot more power, which will be fantastic for when I've got a laptop or, you know, to charge up or some other device. So the key here again, make sure you get the right fuse size. Keep your handy fuses, you know, different amperages available, and you know, ideally have your electrical panels so they're pretty easy to access, as this one is right here, in places where you're not running wire all the way back across the van after you built it out and you go, oh my gosh, now I need to add a power for this thing. It's you know, if you have your fuse panels dispersed throughout the van, with power, just bigger power going each one, now your wire runs for each of these loads is really pretty, you know, remedial, right? It's a short run, it's lower amperage because you're not running as far, so the longer you don't have as much resistance on those wires, so it really benefits it. Make sure all your wires are labeled. Again, those labels that I showed you, Label Maker, you can get that in not only different diameters of wire for wires, so 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch, even 1/4 inch over small wires, so it'll shrink down the appropriate size. Wire everything that says like DC, it says DC ground, is before I really made sure everything was DC negative, but anyways, make sure everything's labeled well so you know exactly what that bus bar is for, or that fuse that wire going to that fuse panel. And be safe, right? Shut off your circuits, pull your fuses before you hook up wires to them, and then voila, move forward with your wiring additions. So there you go. Those are my tips of the day for wiring, adding wiring and so forth in your van. I hope this is really helpful. Absolutely do subscribe. I'm going to keep providing more videos. Tell me what you want in the comments if you want some videos on more stuff to learn, and I'll certainly do videos on those, and try to help you out with anything in your comments as well that I can. All right, thanks, and good luck with your van build out, and get out there, enjoy it. Get out there, enjoy as much as you can every single week. Even if you're building out your van right now, still get outside and enjoy even an empty van before you have your systems. You can still get out and enjoy it and make the best use of it. And so anyways, hopefully happy cheers, and hopefully see you on the trails.